Good morning. How is everyone? Great. Still enjoying the course? Okay, so now what we're going to do this morning is go a little further from where we left off yesterday, if you remember. Yesterday we spoke about how the brain is a map for consciousness, and consciousness is the source of all experience, and all experience occurs in the form of perceptions, emotions, thoughts, and also choices, volition. So we'll take that understanding and go deeper into exploring the biggest mystery, which is who or what is God, and what is reality, and how do we experience it. So here are some principles which are not here in the slides. So let's go over them. So the first principle is biology. Everyone knows what biology is, this experience, body-mind. Biology is different in different states of consciousness. So as we evolve in consciousness, our biological organism also evolves. Literally, the experience of the biological organism. So that's principle number one. They're all connected, by the way. So principle number two would be emotions are different in different states of consciousness. Principle number three would be thinking is different in different states of consciousness. Principle number four would be perception is different in different states of consciousness. Maybe Renee is making notes so he can project this. Okay? So what did I say just now? Perception. Okay. Then next principle would be reality is different in different states of consciousness. Personal identity is different in different states of consciousness. And that which we call God is different in different states of consciousness. That's enough. So those are the principles we are going to explore, and we're going to go slowly and carefully into how people experience reality, and then we're going to take it a step further, okay? So when we explore reality, is this working? Okay, now it is. Okay, so when we explore reality, and we can go over these words because, words are invented by human beings in order to explain what they think they know and what they think they experience. And so we choose the best words, knowing that words are a poor translation for a deeper understanding. I think one of my favorite quotes is Rumi, who says, God's language is silence, everything else is poor translation. So we are going to explore the poor translation. Okay, the first world that we know, everyone here knows, is this world that we call the physical world, right? We experience it through our senses, 5 senses. We've emphasized a lot about those 5 senses. We experience it as 3-dimensional, although it's evolving in time. the world doesn't look the same as it looked to humans, say 100 years ago or 200 years ago, because even the look of the world is shaped by the perception of the world, and the perception of the world is shaped by the consciousness of one who's looking. But in any case, the world is known by our five senses, the universe. By the way, when I say the world, I include the body. Okay, when I say the material world, I include the body, because body is also material, or at least experiences matter, right? So your body is not different from the physical world. It's part of the activity that we call the world. Preferably even go further and say the body-mind, because we are not the body-mind. The body-mind is an experience just like the rest of the world. We can experience thoughts, we can see them, we can witness them, we can observe them, we can observe emotions. So, by and large though, the physical world is experienced by the five senses. It's changing. We know it's always changing. Now, there's no such thing as a fixed reality. At least here we believe in what is called causality. You know, everything that we call a cause has an effect, and everything that we call an effect in turn becomes a cause of something else. So it's kind of linear cause-effect. In the physical world, we observe organisms are born and they die, including our own biological organism. Everything seems to have a firm boundary, whether it's a microphone or this clicker or your body, the lamp, the flowers, they all have boundaries. There's a physical law that we invoke to explain the fact that everything decays. It's called entropy, the laws of thermodynamics. Time seems to flow, the experience of time seems to flow with the past, present, and future. Events, once they happen, they have happened, they're definite. Matter seems to dominate energy, although we think and we know that energy and matter are the same thing, E is equal to mc squared. And we have an assumption that if we know the laws of physics, chemistry, at least those laws, physics and chemistry, then we can predict everything. We will see that that's not true, but the laws of physics and chemistry seem to be predictable. But even biology seems to be predictable. That's why pharmaceutical companies make drugs that interfere with certain mechanisms. But that also something we'll see is not totally true. But this is how we interpret what we call physical reality. Okay, so now we go to the second level, which, and I should warn you that some people will have a lot of objections to what I'm saying. They are fundamentalists. So just like in religion there are fundamentalists, there are fundamentalists in science. And it's okay, you know, every discipline has its fundamentalists. So let's call this the quantum domain, or we can call it the domain of information and energy if you want, or we can call it the mind level of nature, the mind level. Now, of course, the reason why I said a lot of people will find this objectionable, and they do, a lot don't. Over the last 30 years, many have changed their minds. But a lot of people, because they don't think that nature has a mind. You know, they think only the mind is only that which speaks in English with an Indian accent. Okay? So if you go by that definition, then only some of us have a mind. But we are saying something much more significant. Wherever there's physical activity, there is a mind. Wherever there's physical activity, there's a mind. And what is the mind? Again, we're using words. So it's energy information. What's a thought? It's energy information. So just now, as you're sitting there, can you please wiggle your toes, everyone? How did that happen? There was energy and there was information. Wiggling toes is different than making the choice to go to Hawaii. Okay, so every thought has those two components that it manifests as, energy and information. And that energy and information is activated by an intention. Whether it's wiggling toes or going for lunch or sitting at this lecture or going for a vacation in Hawaii. Okay, it comes from an intention that transforms itself. So we are taking the liberty of saying that creation begins with an intention. All of creation. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Turns out, by the way, that is a very accurate description of how the universe could have come into existence, depending on what we mean by God. Okay, so creation manifests, which means it arises from that which is unmanifest. Unmanifest means we are not observing it, that's all. Most of our reality is unmanifest, right? We have common reality, like we're experiencing this room right now, but then there's a reality that you have, which is very private. Your own thoughts, your own feelings, imagination, what you're thinking about your personal relationships, or what you're going to have for dinner, or which movie you liked and which you didn't, and whether your husband or wife loves you or not. So that's a very private domain that I don't have access to. Although, by the way, your face is a readout of that. Okay, your face is a printout of what's happening in your internal life. Maybe you should try this. Watch your face in the mirror in the morning and say, how am I feeling? And then see how you make different expressions, smile, frown. See how your mood will also change, because they're linked. Your face is a readout, just like your brain is a readout. Your brain is not the source of anything, it's just the readout of what's happening in consciousness, what we call neural correlates. So is your face, in a sense, so is your body, and so is your world. But here we see that when we start going in this level of energy and information, that cause-effect become fluid. Okay, there's no direct cause or effect. So you ask me, do you want tea or coffee? I could say tea, I could say coffee, or I could say, I want to see a movie. We are so unpredictable. Okay, this deeper domains of existence, we start to see many choices, unpredictability. So there's no such thing as cause-effect. Birth and death occur at Planck speed, which means everything that is born instantly dies. A thought is born, it dies instantly. We don't recognize this carefully because we have the experience of continuity, which means that the universe and everything else we're experiencing appears continuous to us. But it's actually not. Every experience is being born and it dies as soon as it is born. The difference between past, present, and future is not even. This is an approximation. Planck speed means the distance a photon or a light travels in Planck time, which is the smallest unit of time. For practical purposes, Every experience is born and it dies instantly. There's no difference between past, present, and future. A thought. Now, of course, if you pay attention to that thought, then the next thought is similar to the previous thought, But it's still a new thought. Why did my boss fire me? He doesn't like me. He's a racist. All of that. It's kind of following the trajectory of the previous thought through karma, memory, desire. But every thought is new. And every thought is dying as soon as it's born. So too is every perception intermittent, and it is born and it dies at the same time. So even though now you're looking at me, Deepak seems to be here, and seems to be sitting in the same chair, but actually both the chair and Deepak have been born and have died many times over since you came into this room, and so have you. Perception is, the moment of perception is like taking a photo. Okay, so when I take your photo, you're not what the photo, you are not in that photo. That is over. Taking a photo of the ocean. It's a still point of observation. But as we said in these last few days, everything is moving. So, in fact, all experience, including the experience of perception, is happening at such a speed that it's not apparent to us. If you go to a movie is a series of still frames, and if you take those frames and you move them in an old-fashioned movie, at 24 frames a second, you'll see continuity, you'll see a movie. But if you slow down the movement, like anybody seen old Charlie Chaplin movies? It's very jerky, right? Because the frames weren't moving at that speed. And today we have digital movies. So there's on, off, which means the world is a discontinuity. Your body is a discontinuity. Your mind is a discontinuity. Because between every on and the next on, there's an off. And were it not for that, there would be no experience. Experience is based on on-off. Simple example, if I put my hand on your thigh and I don't move it, after a while you won't know it's there. But then if I move it again, you might say, what the heck are you trying to do? Right? You need both the on and the off to have an experience. When you're wearing your clothes, after a while you don't know that you're actually wearing these clothes, your socks or your shoes, unless there's some discomfort or you start to move, or I bring your attention to that. So if I bring your attention, then of course you become aware of it. But normally we are not aware that everything is going on and off. If there is an on, there has to be an off. If there's an off, there has to be an on. And we'll see that all the action is actually in the off. The on is just this, momentary switch on. And the on-off produces what we call the experience of time. In the off, there is no time. Just like no experience of time. When you're fast asleep and you're deep sleep, not talking about dream sleep, although dream has its own time, but in deep sleep there is no time. Your being lives there. Being lives there eternally because it's not in time. That's why sleep is such a clue to what reality is. Tomorrow we'll speak. Tomorrow? Sometime. We'll speak about higher states of consciousness. We'll get there. ultimately, higher states of consciousness, where we recognize that our real home is in the timeless domain of existence, which is 99.99999% of all reality. It's sub-empirical, which means it can't be observed. It's like a vast ocean of consciousness, of which the empirical domain is just a little blip. Even your unconscious mind lives there. You know, it processes information. That's why actually in sleep we can process information and creativity. And have we done yet in the instruction part anything like recapitulation yet? And okay, so be sure that we do. If I don't remind me or some project or anyone, recapitulation at night and all that, that's a very good way of slowly opening up to the experience of wakefulness in deep sleep. Okay, so birth and death are happening. They have to happen, otherwise the universe would be a piece of plastic. Okay, even plastic at the fundamental level goes on and off, atoms and subatomic particles. Okay, so the experience of time begins here. Everything is indivisible. There are no edges now anymore. This microphone and this body and this table and this table and this chair, they're all part of one reality. If they weren't, you won't be able to send anybody a text message or your selfie to your friend in China or anything like that. Everything is connected. Here's something very interesting to realize. On a perceptual level, the difference between this and this and this and this, at a very fundamental level, it's just a difference in color and shape. Are you getting that? This is a different color than this. So color and shape go together. But actually, there's no difference between this and this. It's part of one continuity, as is this. There's a shape and a color, there's a shape and a color, and there's no shape and color, but it's one thing. Am I making sense? Huh? Yes or no? How many people say yes? And how many people say no? Okay, so now next time you see an object, just see it as a shape and a color, period. And then you see the next object next to it, there's no front, there's no behind, it's all one thing. It's just a different color. And there's no color out there anyway, it's all in your consciousness. So how people interpret this, okay, the events are uncertain, probabilities can be measured, everything is going on and off, everything also has a wave-like frequency, everything extends spatially and represents energy. In fact, you know, when you ask people about quantum physics, one thing is very clear, that the calculations work. How people interpret that is up to them, how they, you know, there are more than 20 interpretations of quantum physics, and so everyone has a favorite, and maybe tomorrow we'll do a little bit of that. But the interpretations of quantum physics are left to philosophers. The calculations of quantum physics are left to scientists. If you ask scientists philosophical questions like, what does this mean? They'll say, shut up and calculate. Otherwise you won't get your tenure and you'll miss your promotion, and you may as well go hang out with people like Deepak. Yeah. Seriously. Okay. So this is a different world which now is responsible for 70% of our economy. You know, everything we do, from computers to transistors to superconductors to everything, your iPhone, your email, all depends on the calculations of this realm which we are saying is actually the mind of the universe. So actually we can go back to the slides. We can call this you want to be really simple about this: body, mind, spirit. Okay. So now this is the third domain, body, mind and spirit. This is not in time, so it's eternal, it's immortal. It's not subject to birth and death. Everything is correlated with everything. Another word for this, again, I know when I say these things, I get some people very enraged, but a lot of people do agree. Another word for this is entanglement. Or another word for this is synchronicity. Okay, so this means that everything is synchronized or correlated or in tune with everything else. So this is actually, what Einstein was very upset about when actually he wrote an equation with the help of two other people, a mathematical equation called the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen equation. And it was actually an attempt to say how ridiculous quantum physics is. But it turned out to be true. Okay, because somebody later called John Bell wrote another mathematical theorem, and now there's scientific proof that everything in the universe is correlated with everything else, coincides. It doesn't mean everything is connected. It's beyond that. Everything is inseparable. Connected means connection implies local communication. I am speaking to you and it takes a microsecond for you or less than a microsecond to hear me. That's local. I send you a letter and put it in the mailbox. You get it 3 days later. That's called local. I send you an email, you get it less than a second later, but there's a lag, okay, between when I send you the email and when you get it. Okay, have you seen those programs where CNN correspondent is in China and she's speaking and the sound comes like just a little bit later? Okay, that's local. But non-local means instantaneous. Instantaneous. No lag in space or time. It took scientists a long time to actually get comfortable with this, particularly Einstein, because the other person around his time, the big father of all quantum mechanics, was Niels Bohr, who was from Denmark, and they never agreed. Till the day they died, they never agreed on this one point. Is the universe local or non-local? And the joke is, of course, Einstein was cremated, by the way. But let's say Einstein is buried in New Jersey, in Princeton, which is where he used to teach, and Niels Bohr is buried in Copenhagen. Every time Einstein turns in his grave, Niels Bohr turns the other side. Instantly. So what this means is you tickle the universe here and it laughs millions of miles away. Not only millions of miles, millions of light years away. This correlation, it doesn't mean they're both doing the same thing, but their behavior is correlated. Okay, let's say Jane and John are doing the tango in Argentina, and there is somebody called Bob and Alice on the moon, and they're doing the foxtrot, but somehow their movements are correlated. So every time this one turns this way, the other one turns another way, but it's coordinated. It's part of one dance. So here are three words you might want to remember. The correlation or the synchronicity is unmediated. There's no signal that goes from one place to the other. It just happens. It's unmediated. There's no signal. It's unmitigated. Unmitigated means that the robustness, the strength of the correlation does not diminish with distance in space-time. Distance in space-time. Space and time are two ways of looking at the same thing. So which means something that happened 1 billion years ago could be correlated to something that will happen 1 billion years from here, now. It's unmediated, it's unmitigated. The strength, because there's no signal going, the strength of the correlation doesn't diminish with space-time, distance in space. And it's instant. In other words, it's one dance. The whole universe is one harmonious symphony, universe. One song. And we are part of the song. Actually, we're not even a part. Part means separation. This is part of this. This microphone is part of, right now, my hand, which is part of my body, which is part of this room. Parts don't exist. It's one activity, it's one harmony, one song. There is no time here, there is no energy here, no signals. It's all the potential for energy. So if I ask you move your hand, the thought, we can't measure the thought, it's invisible. Once that thought transforms, then there's energy. So there's no energy here, but it's the potential for infinite energy. It's also infinite organizing power. Everything is being organized from here. Your soul is your personal aspect of that universal being. Infinite creative potential. Wholeness exists at every point. Unbounded. Every point in space is every other point. It's immeasurable, can't be measured. In fact, it does the measuring. It's infinitely dynamic, even though it's silent. So at this level, infinite silence and infinite dynamism go together. This is the spirit. Can't be seen. Why can't be seen? It's dimensionless. That's always, the spirit has always been thought to be dimensionless, but without it, there would be no experience of dimensions. It's formless. Without it, there would be no experience of form. Tagore has a beautiful poem. You know Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet, Indian poet. He said, in this playhouse of infinite forms, I caught sight of the formless. And so my life was blessed. Caught sight of that which cannot be seen. Being, spirit, soul, awareness. Okay, is this too complicated or it's okay? So here are 5 principles that we need to know as we go towards the unmanifest. They're important, by the way, okay? As we go to the nature of reality. The first is, in the ultimate reality, which is the self, there are no objects, only possibilities. All possibilities exist simultaneously. At this level, there is non-local correlation, what we are calling synchronicity. At this level, there are quantum leaps. Now, this is a term we are borrowing from quantum physics, to the annoyance of certain quantum physicists who think they own the terms, but it's okay. So a quantum leap in physics is when a particle moves from one location to another location without going through the space between. Okay, so it's here and it's now there and it didn't go from here to there. If you watch Star Trek, it's when the captain says, "Beam me up, Scotty." Okay, and also now in these new movies, anybody saw the new movie about black holes and Interstellar. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, see it, please. But it's all about, going from one universe to another universe, quantum leaps. Okay, without going through the space in between. But our consciousness is like that, right? If I ask you to think of your home in Aspen, and now think of being here, you didn't have to come from Aspen to here. Or think of a building in New York and think of a building in Los Angeles, you didn't go through Arizona. Okay, our consciousness is always taking quantum leaps. What do we call that? We call that creativity. Creativity is a disruption in continuity. That's why even these days in new technologies, when they say he's an entrepreneur and he's really disruptive or she's really disruptive, this is a disruptive technology. Why? Because what came out of this technology, we didn't know where it came from. Could 100 years ago somebody, the Wright brothers trying to fly a device or a contraption that flew less than 200 yards, could they have imagined that we were sending intergalactic probes into the seas of space? So creativity is always disruptive. I would like to say creativity is the same thing as breaking karma. Why? Because what is karma? It's the same old stuff. Repeat patterns. That's why karma is called prison. Rumi's poem, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open?" Because the prison of karma is invisible. It's the conditioned mind, right? It's hypnosis of social conditioning. And it's hundreds and thousands of years, so it's not easy to break out of it until you become aware. And when you become aware, you say, I don't have to think inside the box. I don't even have to think outside the box because there's no box at all. It was made up. So at this level, we also accept uncertainty. Let's change that uncertainty to unpredictability. I borrowed that term from quantum physics, which is the uncertainty principle. But uncertainty principle is not quite accurate. It's unpredictable to the outside observer. Something is happening there. These atoms seem to be moving in an unpredictable manner, randomly, but they're building a universe. It's like going to Grand Central Station and everybody's kind of moving hither and thither. It seems totally chaotic till you find out that everybody's going someplace. So many people are going to Pennsylvania and so many are going to Massachusetts. And every time I go to Grand Central Station, I see how chaotic this is, but actually there's purpose here. Okay, so accepting unpredictability is something you have to do in order to be creative. You have to be totally uncomfortable with the realm of unpredictability because there would be no creativity. Our soul is infinitely creative and it lives in that realm. These are important principles because these are qualities of the self. Okay? Over here, again, I'm using terms which we don't need to know to use, but here what we can say is possibility becomes actuality if we are comfortable with our own self. Okay, now you've seen this diagram, I think. Has this been shown before already? Somebody has shown it to you. So let's not go into it detail again, but it's a good map. Okay, so the universal domain, which is pure potentiality, in Sanskrit terms, we would call it Brahman, collective soul, the realm of devas, gods, goddesses, personal level, karma, memory, desire, then ego, intellect, mind, and then differentiating into energy, body, environment. One continuum experienced in different modes of knowing and experience. You had your hand raised, so
Could you just say a little bit more about, I think you said, predictability?
be comfortable with unpredictability. It is the source of all creativity. If there was only predictability, then there's no creativity. Even though now people are talking about artificial intelligence and that, we won't be able to tell the difference between artificial creativity and true creativity. Maybe some people won't, but, artificial intelligence can't be creative for the simple reason it's all based on algorithms. Okay, so now we are moving from what we call, how much time do you have? What is our perception of change? Okay, good. So we have to shift from old thinking to new thinking. And when we actually shift to new thinking, we realize that there were people before us who had already thought of this. Okay, so the old series based on common sensory experience. And here the old thinking is matter and mind are different things. Well, now we shouldn't even use the word matter and mind. We should say mind matter or body mind. It's just like we say wave particle, mass energy, space-time. It's one thing. The old thinking was there's an objective world independent of somebody looking at it. So whether you were looking at this microphone or not, it's still there. That's called naive realism. Okay? There's a word for it in philosophy, naive realism, which means that you believe that there's a world or a universe independent of awareness, not independent of you, unless you define you as awareness, okay? Not independent of you as a body-mind, that is called solipsism, but there's no world independent of awareness. How could there be? So can we take this exercise a little bit deeper? This microphone is an experience. It's a perceptual experience, it's a visual experience, it's an auditory experience. It could be a olfactory experience, a taste experience, but it's an experience. And it is one of those things, or all of those, or all of a combination of those. And those things in turn are modifications of awareness itself. And therefore, this is an experience in witnessing awareness. As much as this is. You don't separate this from anything else. The witnessing awareness is all there is in the end, which is modifying itself as this, and all this. But that was the old way, didn't understand that. That's why we call it naive realism. There's other terms for it, representational realism. Lots of. Einstein was a local realist. So even though Einstein was a genius, he was what they call, in a sense, naive about ultimate reality. Which is, there was a meeting between, if you read my book, You Are the Universe, it starts with a meeting between Einstein and Tagore, the Indian poet, and sage and amazing human being. And they discussed this. In the end, Einstein said, well, my religion is different than yours. And my religion is science. And he admitted by using the word religion that he had faith in science, not as here's the picture, beautiful picture. I just came from Israel, by the way, where I saw the original photographs of that meeting. You can show that picture. And their meeting, and they had great conversations, great respect for each other, but they never agreed with each other. Okay. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, so there, the mind is trapped in your brain, intelligence is localized in the nervous system, maybe in your body, consciousness is derived from matter, and nobody knows how. That's called the heart problem. Human beings are self-contained, independent entities. We are separate, etc., etc. And now we say no. When we actually start to look at the deeper reality, either through the new science or by looking at neuroscience and looking at the cognition and knowing of great seers, we realize that mind and matter are the same thing. We live in a participatory universe. Our attention modifies and creates the objects of our awareness. The world is actually non-physical. It's composed of energy fields, but even the energy fields are considered physical, by the way, by scientists. So they come from an unmanifest field, which is non-physical, which is consciousness, which is spirit. And your mind is part of that, and your mind cannot be localized, although it expresses itself locally. That's the meaning of the word. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Or you can say we are non-local beings having a local experience. And that we are parts of one wholeness, and our bodies are changing, pulsating patterns. Now we will go into the remaining time, we'll go, so how do we navigate this reality, okay? And tomorrow I will go deeper into higher states of consciousness, but today I want to keep it at the level of what we call our understanding of science. Understanding that science is a map. Science is a map. Okay, so this now we will, in biological terms, kind of visit, in a sense, the 7 chakras. For us, 7 chakras is very comfortable. But, go to a medical conference, what the heck are you talking about? So here's another way to talk about it. Okay, so the first level of experience is fight-flight, the reptilian brain that we covered yesterday. In a threatening situation, you run or you fight. Survival. The second level is the reactive response, which is a conditioned response. And remember, yesterday we mentioned, I think we went into the 4 types of reactive response. They're emotional responses, which is what? Being nice and manipulative, being nasty and manipulative, being stubborn and manipulative, and playing the victim, and also being manipulative. This is the ego response. Nice, nasty, stubborn, poor me. All our leaders right now have this response. Right? Think about why the world is a mess. Because we created collectively, our leaders are representing our consciousness. And they're all being nice and manipulative sometimes, mostly nasty and manipulative, stubborn and manipulative. And then everything goes wrong, it's Russia's fault. Right? The Russians did it. We did it. Okay, so this is the second response. The third response is restful awareness, or you can just say being centered, okay, which we are now getting into the habit here, right? Habit here. Every day we practice our sadhana so we can remain centered. But we don't have to remain centered in only meditation, we can be centered all the time. Which means centered all the time is the scenery never overshadows the seer. The scenery will keep changing, but the seer is always the same. By the way, the scenery includes your body-mind. You're not your body-mind, you're the witness of the body-mind. So start taking a position. Start taking a stand. And what's the stand? I am witnessing awareness, nothing else. Anytime you get overshadowed by an experience, go back to this notion that you are witnessing awareness. Everything is like a passing breeze. The breeze will pass, but you are always there. Or take a stand and say, who's having this experience? Who am I that is having this experience? And who I am is having this experience is witnessing awareness. So we get into the habit of being centered. That's what it means. Not being overshadowed by experience. Whether the experience is a perceptual experience, a mental experience, an experience in relationship, whatever, the witnessing awareness is the ground of existence. We take a stand that that's where we live. Meditation helps, everything helps. Yoga helps, and all the things that go along with yoga help. Ayurveda, the understanding of the continuum of body, mind and universe is all of these things help. But take a stand that I'm not going to move from there. If necessary, just remind yourself once in a while. Who or what is the seer that is having the experience of this scenery? It's all part of the scenery. And the scenery, of course, is being born and is dying in every moment of now. So how can we hold on to it or identify with it even? So this is there's a phrase in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, established in being, perform action. In Sanskrit, yogast kuru karmani, established in yoga, perform action. And then don't even worry about the fruits of the action, they are guaranteed. Why? Because you're coming from the level of being. So that's the third response. The fourth response is built on the third response, which is called the intuitive response. So what is intuition? Intuition is actually going beyond cause-effect into understanding what's really going on. Because cause-effect is on the surface. The universe is not cause-effect, the universe is context. Everything that happens comes out of a context. So intuition, we can say, is a form of intelligence that is contextual. that is relational, it understands relationships, that is wise, that eavesdrops on a bigger mind, a higher mind, that is closer to reality. Now we'll see that some people fool themselves that they're intuitive, but that's another story. This is real. Intuition is real. It's much more, it's wise, it's contextual, it's relational, it doesn't have a win-lose orientation. Who's going to win? Our politicians are only interested in winning all the time, leaders also. Who won? It's not interested in that. It's eavesdropping on what's really going on. It eavesdrops on the wisdom of the universe. The next response, which follows automatically, is the creative response. Not only to know what's going on, but now we can use this word to be disruptive, to create something that never existed before. Never existed before. And that applies to everything that we call creativity, whether it's writing a play or a song or a novel or a book or a new invention. But we would go beyond that in Ayurveda and the understanding of yoga, creating the life that you want, creating the relationships that you want, or in one word, creating the experiences that you want, because experience is everything, right? So the highest level of creativity is to create the life you want, the experiences you want. All the other forms of creativity are part of it. Sixth response would be higher guidance, which means now you are actually tapping into not only your personal intelligence, but you're tapping into collective intelligence. What Carl Jung, I don't like the word, but we'll use it. Carl Jung said the collective unconscious. Okay, but it's not really unconscious, it's the consciousness of everything that came before us, our ancestors, their learning, their experiences, their karma. It's all grounded in this unmanifest and ultimately going all the way back to the mystery of creation. That's higher guidance. And then finally, sacred response. Tomorrow we can talk about what is the meaning of enlightenment. Sacred response is you don't have to do anything, because you are the universe. Okay. With that, okay, slight elaboration, and it won't take too long on this. So this is fight, flight, run, freeze. That has to be corrected. Run, freeze, or fight. Correct? Okay. Fight, flight. Reactive response. We've gone through this, being nice, nasty, stubborn, playing the victim. The reactive response, when we can't deal with situations, then we fall victim to addiction. Addiction is an escape. And we get also addicted to things like adrenaline. There are a lot of people who are addicted to stress. We get addicted to outcome, addicted to melodrama, addicted to perfection, addicted to cynical interpretation, focusing on negativity, become habits. And these are the three fundamental addictions that cover all our addictions. Either it's some kind of sensation, from sex to alcohol to drugs, or it's the addiction to security. The addiction to security is the biggest cause of insecurity. The people who are wanting to be secure are the most insecure people. when our fundamental state is unpredictable, right? And the addiction to power. Okay, then we were kind of just elaborating. So this is a beautiful word for this, being centered, Chitta Shakti. Chitta means consciousness. Shakti is usually referred to as the divine feminine. So the divine feminine is not strident in the power or angry. She functions from this state. This is real power. Okay, inner calm in the midst of danger, silence in the midst of turbulence, peace in the midst of chaos, conflict, being centered but alert, inner stillness in the midst of dynamic action. Anyone ever been to the African safari in Tanzania or Kenya? Those animals, those gazelles, are beautiful examples of stillness and alertness. Suddenly there's a cheetah there in the distance and they're immediately alerted. But otherwise, they're still and calm. Chitta Shakti. Intuitive response, we know we said already. This is also called Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Gyan Shakti. Ichha means desire, the Shakti of desire grounded in being. Kriya, the Shakti of action in being. And Gyan, the Shakti of knowledge in being. Which leads to spontaneous fulfillment of desire, synchronicity, spontaneous right action. What is spontaneous right action? It's not burdened by memory. It's not burdened by anticipation. There's no resistance. The right thing in this moment. Creative response. Okay, so creative response. Now here are some guidelines to how to harness that. It's based on the first. You include the previous responses and you also transcend the previous responses, which means you're able to use, let's say you're caught in the middle of the night and some mugger comes along and has a gun to your head. You might want to knock the gun out of his hand or run fast. Okay, so that would be the fight-flight response used appropriately. Okay, so as we move up the scale of responses, we include but also transcend the previous response, which means it's there in an emergency. You got angry with your child, but then moved on. For that moment, the anger was appropriate. There was no hostility. You love your child, so you got angry because he's playing with fire or something like that. Okay, so that is included but transcended. So here are some things that help us to move in the direction of creativity. Relinquish the known and find freedom from the past. No regrets. What happened, happened. Okay. Do learn from the past so you don't repeat it. This is actually a phrase, this in italics, inverted commas, is from the Shiva Sutras, comes from the Yogi of Yogis. I use memories, but I do not allow memories to use me. We use memories because we've learned from them. We can create new things. We don't repeat mistakes, but we are not victimized by our memories. Embracing uncertainty, paradox, ambiguity, which is the nature of existence. Certainty, security, all of that are neuroses. In fact, even Freud said, when he defined neurosis, he said it's the inability to embrace uncertainty and ambiguity. Seeing the universal in the particular and the particular in the universal. So, the particular here is a rose, but the whole universe is here. Rainbows and sunshine and earth and water and wind and air and the infinite void and the entire history of cosmic evolution, biological evolution is right here. That's what it means to see the particular in the universal and the universal in the particular. The particular contains the universal contains the particular. Full awakening of the tanmatras. Tanmatras are refining the subtle senses. This is what you got the sutras for yesterday. Okay, the sutras we did yesterday afternoon, that's to refine your experience of the subtle body and the senses. That's directly from Patanjali. Mind-body coordination through the practice of yoga, physical fitness, poise, grace, and understanding the meaning of karma and relationship. What does this mean? It means that every relationship that you have, whether it's with your significant other, your brother, your sister, your parents, your friends, your professional, it's ultimately woven into karma. What does that mean? It means that you're there to learn something from it and then transcend the karma. Otherwise, you'll repeat the karma. So here you don't even say this is a good relationship, this is a bad relationship. This is a relationship for enlightenment. It's to get you closer to who you are. It's to help you to get closer to who you are. To learn from it. Now, one thing about karma is, in a sense, everybody is karmically related to everyone else, so we are all kind of karmically here together. There's a reason. In this case, to learn. So, but when your emotions are woven into the relationship, there's more karma there. There's more, in a sense, baggage there. Don't even think of it as good or bad, but the emotional energy means you really need to learn something from that relationship. This is we can say this is the milieu in which creativity arises. So creativity is the opportunity to take any circumstance and make it a creative process, no matter what it is. Here are some hints on creativity and how we can harness the power of creativity. Now you'll notice that all the 9 steps are beginning with I. And I knew the steps, but in meditation I said, how can I make them all start with I? So I made that up. Okay? So in any creative process, you start with an intention. What is the intention? It's our second question with every meditation. What do I want? In fact, the intention should not be forced. The intention should just begin with this question. What do I want? It's so generic that you should never have to force it. You can ask that intention in any situation. In this relationship, what do I want? In this business, what do I want? In this job, whatever. What do I want is the question. Then, of course, as intelligent human beings, we gather information around that intention. How? Google it. Get the information you want. There's nothing that's not available, by the way. So here is, I'm not being facetious about that. Somebody has Parkinson's disease, okay? The intention is to get rid of the Parkinson's disease or get rid of the symptoms or ameliorate or have a comfortable life, whatever. Before I go to my doctor, Google the information. Go to the National Library of Medicine. Go to every source that tells you about that. So that you know more about that than the expert. If it's your creative process, you have to be an expert in it. And it doesn't matter what that is, because I think healing is a creative process. Healing is biological creativity. So nobody should know more about what you're dealing with than you know. Whether it's Parkinson's disease or cancer or whatever, it's your issue. So know more about it. Don't trust authority. Then you can question the authority. Otherwise you can't even question the authority. And in fact, you should question the authority, because let them also think about it. Okay? The third step is information analysis. So you analyze the invention. Pros and cons. Should I take L-Dopa, or should I try this drug? Or I'm just giving you medical examples. But it could be in anything. Should I invest here? Should I not invest here? Should I marry this guy? Should I not marry this guy? You have to analyze that, you know, at this stage. Then the fourth step is you let it go. You incubate. And the best way to incubate, obviously, is what we do. Our daily practice is the incubation. Sadhana is the incubation. And that includes everything that we are embarking on in this. And if you are now at this fourth stage, you also, by letting it go, what are you doing? You're surrendering to uncertainty. And you're surrendering to unpredictability. Only by that will you allow the proliferation and the processing that your consciousness needs to do in order to give you a creative outcome. Unless you surrender to uncertainty, which means you now let go of your attachment to the outcome, only by surrendering to that and incubating, letting go and incubating in the realm of uncertainty, unpredictability, you will allow all that you have learned, information and your insight, to proliferate in the field of all possibilities, which is your own being. Which could also, by the way, happen in sleep. Sleep is incubation. Dream states are also a form of incubation. Many discoveries have been made in dream states, starting with the benzene ring and chemistry, and Einstein dreaming he was riding a beam of light, etc. I don't know how many of these stories are true, but they're part of mythology anyway. Okay? So, what happens after incubation? There's a sudden flash of insight. It's what people who deal with the understanding of creativity, they call the aha experience. That flash of insight, which comes like a bolt from the blue. Where did this come from? If the insight is authentic, you know, there are many pretend insights. Especially when you go to what they call pitch meetings with entrepreneurs. You know, they have lots of insights because they're selling you an idea. But, you know, if your insight is authentic, you don't even have to sell it. You know it to be true. So what's an insight? It's a discontinuity. It's a break. It's a break from everything before. It's actually a quantum leap. That's what creativity is. If it is authentic, then what happens is, if it's authentic, that leads to what we call inspiration, not motivation. Motivation is useless. Why? Because motivation comes from the mind. You know, you join a club because you're going to lose weight. In 15 days, you're not going to the club, they get your money. You join Weight Watchers or whatever. Doesn't work. Inspiration is unstoppable because it comes from the spirit. It's, as they say in the wisdom tradition, inspiration is like a child that is born, cannot return to the womb. The word inspiration means to be inspired, just like the word enthusiasm means to be in touch with God, on theos. On means becoming one with theos, God. So enthusiasm, true enthusiasm, authentic enthusiasm, which is infectious, and inspiration, which is authentic and genuine, is spiritual experience. Then you, of course, the next step is implementation. The final step, 2 steps, integration. You integrate it with, so your life doesn't get disrupted. But then finally, there's a death and a resurrection, what we call incarnation. So creativity is a reincarnation. Because nothing has changed. Everything was the same as before, except context, meaning, purpose, relationship. They've taken a quantum leap. And something is born that never existed before. So, as we move from the creative response into what we call higher guidance, prophecy, vision, the realm of the gods and goddesses, which are archetypal patterns of our own being. Nothing is outside us. Okay? So at this level, there's the ability to look into the future and even predict it in terms of probability based on choices in the past. It's also, we call it, visionary response, the realm of prophets and seers and visionaries. As when a Martin Luther King says, I have a dream, and then a few years later, civil, or even immediately, civil rights movement, Mahatma Gandhi gets pushed out of a train. He sees the crumbling of British colonialism, and on. These are examples that come to us from the lives of great saints, seers, because they saw something that the rest of humanity never saw. There's a shift in cognitive and perceptual mechanisms. You don't see the world the same way. There's the awakening of dormant potentials and the wisdom to use them. Yesterday I introduced you the word siddhis, the goddess Siddhi and the goddess Riddhi, control over the elements and forces of the universe. Absence of selfish motivations represents the highest aspirations of the collective soul and the collective spiritual inheritance, and is usually embodied in a mythical being. Like, in the Vedic literature or in the Puranas, the mythical beings are Ganesh, Lakshmi, goddess of abundance, Saraswati, all these various gods and goddesses are actually symbolic expressions of higher states of consciousness. We can go into that detail maybe at a later session. But this is an amazing realm where you, in a sense, are not doing anything, you're being guided. So let me actually share with you a very interesting story that happened to me pretty recently. I was in South Africa and traveling in all the big cities, and I got invited by Mahatma Gandhi's granddaughter, who's about my age, and she lives in a house outside of Durban where Mahatma Gandhi, before he became Mahatma Gandhi, lived as well. So she lives in the same house now, and part of the house is a museum, his granddaughter. And a lot of you probably know, but some may not know, that before Gandhi became what everyone knows as the great Mahatma, which means the great soul, He was a barrister, he was a lawyer who had graduated from England in law. And he spent most of his youth in South Africa. So he didn't even think of himself as Indian, although he was of Indian heritage. His inheritance, his ancestors came from Gujarat, India, etc. And if you look at his old photographs, he's dressed in a three-piece suit with a waistcoat and a tie and a watch and what we call a top hat, Edwardian clothes, as a British-trained lawyer. And then this episode occurs, if you've seen the movie Gandhi, where he happened to be sitting in what they call the black or colored section in a train, where he happened to be sitting in the white section and he was thrown off the train. And he had a vision. He saw British colonialism fall apart. So he started, with the help of a friend called John Dubé, who lived across the street from this house that I went to see. And John Dubé was a priest. He practiced voodoo, but he was also a little bit into Christian, some of the Christian, this happened with a lot of places where missionaries went, where people incorporated their own traditional religion with Christianity. So John Dubé was one of those people, and he was a neighbor, so they became friends. And Mahatma Gandhi said to John Dubé, why don't we start the African National Congress, ANC? And so they started it. And then Mahatma Gandhi came to the conclusion, after a while, he said, I'm Indian, I should go back to India, maybe do something for India. So he told John Dubé, you stay here with the ANC, and I'll start something called the Indian National Congress. Now, in India, there wasn't apartheid. There was a lot of, the conditions were not so bad as in South Africa. So Gandhi was much more effective in India than John Dubé was in Africa. In fact, after a while, John Dubé struggled and struggled. The ANC lived, and he passed away. And his grave is about, little close to the house where he lived. And so, the same house close by is Gandhi's house. In any way, Mahatma Gandhi was successful. And who read his life? Who read his book? Who read it? Yeah. Who read the biography of, which is called My Experiments with Truth? Anyone? Martin Luther King, which created the civil rights movement. Who read Martin Luther King's biography? Nelson Mandela. Okay. Who then brought, he was 23 years or more in prison, and he brought freedom to Africa. In fact, the day that he got released from prison, he went first to that place where Gandhi's house was. Then he went to John Dubé's house. Then he went to the grave. He saluted the grave. He said, Mr. President, I have come to inform you that Africa is a free country. Who read that? Obama. So you see the full circle? That's where these guys live. Not all the time, but in an archetypal domain where nothing is impossible. So full circle. A story that most people don't even know. And this is called the mythical archetypal domain, where in times of crises, a new consciousness is born because the collective consciousness is ready. Finally, the sacred response. which is becoming one with the source. The embodiment of pure being. It's also called Ananda Shakti. Ananda means bliss. A complete transformation of personal and universal self into one experience, seeing the whole universe in your being, complete loss of the fear of death, because you realize that death happens to the experience, not the awareness of the experience, and the experiential knowledge of the immortality of existence. So I'm going to stop here because it's a good point to stop, and then maybe I'll continue with this in the afternoon and do what I was going to do a little later. We'll fit it in all together. Is this okay? Okay, thanks.